fundraiser for the expedition, which you are setting off on very shortly. I think it's June the 11th, isn't it, that you leave the island? And the fundraising is to go towards the whole project that you're doing. How are you doing with reaching the target, first of all?
So I'm very nearly there. I've got to confirm a few last things with some more corporate sponsors, but nearly at my target, which is just crazy. When I look back on at the start, when I was like, how am I going to achieve this? It's just the support I've received has just been incredible.
How much did you need to raise?
I needed to contribute, I think, just under 6,000 to the boat. So yeah.
Wow. We're going to talk more about the expedition in just a moment, but first of all, I just want to know, where did this idea to become a marine scientist come from? What made you want to do that?
My family's always been sort of really involved in the ocean, and my dad used to go diving quite a lot when I was little, and we had these tiny little wetsuits, and when we were about 3 and 4, he used to take us in, and we'd kind of hold on to his shoulder, and he'd put us on a rock, and we'd kind of dip our heads in and look at the seals, and I used to love looking at rock pools, and that was always sort of my main enjoyment and where I felt happiest. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I saw a course in ocean science, and sort of as soon as I got there, I was like, wow, yep, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life.
And as someone who's clearly so passionate about the beauty of what is essentially under and in the sea, it must then be so heartbreaking for you to have seen the developments over the past years with the increasing amounts of plastic in there.
Yeah, I think when you spend a lot of time in there and you see the beauty and the wonder, and there's so much that so many people would find so inspiring and amazing, but the whole problem with the ocean is that when you look at it, you do see this giant blue expanse, and it's very hard to, know what's in there and what's around even our shores. A lot of people wouldn't realise the amazing creatures we have around the Isle of Man, but it's very hard to see the impacts we're having because you do just see this expanse of blue.
How bad is it then, Rowan? Because, we hear, again, conflicting stories about climate change.
In terms of climate change and the oceans, they're not really in a great state. I think the issue is they are facing a lot of pressure in different areas. We've obviously got overfishing, and then we've got a lot of nutrients coming in off the land and fertiliser and things like that, which is having an effect on creating these dead zones where nothing can actually live. Then you have the impacts of plastic pollution, CO2 being absorbed from our sort of industrial ways, and I think it's that multi-dimensional impact that is really kind of seeing the detrimental impacts on the oceans.
And that paints a really bleak picture. Fundamentally, for anybody listening, is there anything that as an individual you can do to really make a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's about showing that you care, and making those sort of sustainable choices. So thinking about what your food comes in, where does it come from? Are you buying asparagus from Peru, or are you buying local produce? And it kind of it's a knock-on effect, because you end up buying local, more money goes into the economy, and it's a positive for everything, really. So about being aware of where your money goes and what you care about. And I think it's about picking something you really care about and putting your efforts into that, because that's how people can make a difference.
And speaking of what we can do here, you're working with DEFRA on a project at the minute, aren't you, with single-use plastics? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the Chief Minister asked us in the Ecosystem Policy team to come up with a plan to help reduce single-use plastics. And the first phase of it is to reduce single-use plastics within government and government departments, because we want to lead by example. And then we're hoping to roll that out and involve local businesses to hopefully become more of a plastic-free island.
Do you think we can actually manage it? Do you think we could be a plastic-free island? And if so, how long do you think it will take?
I think when you say plastic-free island, you've got to think plastic is a useful material, and it's got very many benefits in terms of like the amount of medical advances and food hygiene and things like that. It's about maybe being free of those unnecessary single-use plastics. But I think if you've got enough businesses involved and people really behind it, and there's such a wave of interest, I don't know, I think maybe 5 years, a 5-year plan or something like that, we could really significantly reduce things.
So let's talk then about this expedition that you're setting off on. And you are joining 13 other female scientists, and you're going to be doing research, collecting data, and really, again, looking more in depth at the effect rubbish is having on the environment. Just tell us a little bit more about the place that you're actually going to.
Yep, so the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is meant to be about 3 times the size of France. So the trip itself is about 3,000 nautical miles. So for maybe the first 1,000 miles, we will be travelling to the garbage patch, and then it's about 1,500 nautical miles through it. So it'll be about 2.5 weeks through it, and we'll be trawling every day. And I think a lot of people think of it as this kind of mass that you could walk on, but I think it's better to describe it more like a soup. And more near the centre, you'll be it's going to be really dense. And I think they think there's something like 80 million kilograms of floating plastic there, and just a huge amount of microplastic and large ghost nets and things like that. So it's about going out there and seeing really what it's like, because it's so remote.
How prepared do you think you are for actually seeing it as someone who cares so much about the natural environment?
I've been thinking about that more and more recently, and I don't think I'm prepared at all, because firstly, I can't imagine what it's going to be like to be so remote. I think when you're in the middle of it, you're actually closer to the people in the space station than you are anywhere on Earth. And then to see, the impact of humans there, and even just to see the label on a crisp packet or something, you're like, where did that come from and how is it here? I don't think I'll be able to really wrap my mind around it in time there.
Why is it all gathered here? Is it something to do with the currents and things that I wouldn't understand?
Yeah, so the way that the ocean currents, they kind of filter around the basin, and that kind of creates a vortex, and then it's like when you're in a bath and you've got the bubbles when the sink's going out, the plug's going out, everything kind of congregates in the middle.
Because it is all sort of congregated, is there a possibility at all that we could sort of go in there and just somehow scoop it all up and get rid of it?
So I think there's some crazy statistic, I don't know the exact number, but if boats went out with nets, it would take something like 100,000 years, something crazy. But there's this young scientist, he gained a lot of attention a few years ago. I think he was doing the rounds on Facebook, called Boy and Slat, and he was coming up with a machine that could help to clean the garbage patch, and he's actually been doing a lot of work on it and developing it, and they want to release these machines, and they think that they think maybe in 10 years they could have cleaned 50% of it, because they are actually using the ocean currents themselves to naturally filter the water, and thinking that sort of large scale companies could buy a machine each and kind of work like that. So there are people trying to do nice things.
Which is always good. So I should ask you, I suppose, how bad are our waters? Do you know?
I don't think there's been any large-scale study on the plastics in our waters. I mean, you can see from the beaches and the wonderful work that beach buddies do that there is obviously plastic in our waters, and just the way that our sea, it's kind of a basin that obviously a lot of Ireland and Scotland and England's waste will be able to get into, and it hasn't got that much flow out. So I don't know, there needs to be more research into it, really.
So I mentioned that you are joining 13 other women. You're going to be there for just over a month. How significant is it that it's an all-female team?
I think it's really exciting, and I didn't really realise the statistic before I started, but I think women currently only make up 13% of the science, technology, engineering and maths sectors, which is just crazy. That's worldwide. So we're still massively underrepresented in those areas, and for somebody who I love science, but maybe wouldn't have necessarily gotten into it if I hadn't kind of fallen on my feet in the right place. And it's just about inspiring other women and younger girls to get into science and adventure and, pushing the boundaries.
And was that your experience when you were studying, that it was a very male-dominated environment?
It was quite interesting, really, because I did my undergraduate, and I think I was one of 6 girls in a class of 60, and then I did my masters. I went away and worked for a while and came back and did my masters last year, and I think it was maybe slightly more women. So I don't know if that's maybe because the men have gone into industry already, but there is definitely more women, and it's definitely growing, which is a really positive thing.
And is it just coincidence that this expedition is all women, or was it sort of orchestrated in that way?
No, so this is their 10th expedition they've gone to. They've never gone across the Pacific, but they've always been only women sailing trips. And
there is a female scientist who you say you find particularly inspirational. Who is she?
So Sylvia Earle, Dr. Sylvia Earle, she's an American scientist, and she was one of the first marine scientists back in the 1960s. I think she was part of a team of all female scientists that actually lived. There's a lab off Florida, and it's about 20 meters down, and they lived underwater for 3 weeks. So you're pressurized, and they were some of the first people to do that and do that research. And she's an amazing public speaker. She did an amazing TED talk for anyone who wants to check her out, and she really just kind of gets the problem of the the ocean's problems across so effortlessly.
And speaking of diving, a few years ago you were at a dive centre in Indonesia, and you were responsible for a group of people.
Yeah, that was it was one of those moments when you just kind of look around, and it was these 3 6'5" guys, and I'm only small. I'm only about 5'3", and I'd never been to this dive site before, and it was a bit of a deep dive, and there were currents that could come, and I took them down, and I was kind of navigating with my compass, and I was just down there at one point, and I just kind of looked around, and I was like, wow, I'm doing this, and this is really cool that I'm kind of there. I'm responsible for these people, and I am, and everything's great, and I don't know, I felt that was quite a proud moment for me.
It does make you think of the little Rowan, doesn't it, in the little tiny wetsuit when she went out. It's fantastic. I just want to ask you really quickly, we talked about the Walk the Plank at the start, which is part of the fundraising auction that was held not too long ago to raise money for your expedition. And I just wonder how it made you feel seeing that support, because there were so many local businesses that put in for this auction, and people did pay way over the odds to put towards this. So it must really sort of encourage you to know that people are supportive in that way.
It was so amazing. I just couldn't quite believe it. And I think it was amazing, and all the effort that the Foraging Vinters put into it, because I don't think I would have had the confidence necessarily to put on an event to that scale, because I knew the problem was, important, and what I was doing was exciting and really important. But they really got behind me and pushed it. And then so many people came out, and so many people showed such amazing support. And I was just totally overwhelmed. I think I must have annoyed my family for the rest of the weekend. I was like, I can't believe that happened.
And that's what people always say about the Isle of Man, isn't it? People getting behind a cause, particularly one which is so significant and hopefully will make such a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you met the other people that you're going to go away with?
I've met them on Skype. We were meant to meet up in London, but it was that weekend that all the snow came, so everything sort of ground to a halt. But everyone seems lovely.
On the subject of the plastic soup campaign that she just mentioned there is going to be a Twitter Q&A with PhD student Imogen Napper. That is on the 8th of June, which is World Oceans Day, and that is happening from 1 to 2 p.m. Imogen is actually working at the National Marine Litter Research Unit at Plymouth University, and she's trying to end this plastic soup phenomenon. Her previous research analysed the tiny plastic fibres that are shed when different synthetic materials are laundered, and her current project involves testing products that they say can then capture these fibres. So it's fascinating stuff. It's something I knew nothing about, I have to admit, and if you have any questions for Imogen about her work, you can actually get involved by sending those questions to pa@nfwi.org.uk, or you can just ask those questions on social media using the hashtag WIEndPlasticSoup. Now, obviously, we are joined by Rowan Henthorn, who is on a bit of a mission herself to rid the seas of plastic. And I happened to say before we come on air that we were going to be talking about plastic soup and what did she know about it. And I mentioned Imogen Napper, and not only are you aware of her campaign, but you actually know about Imogen for very good reason too, don't you, Ro?
Yeah, she's on the boat. Well, she's on the expedition, but she's actually on the second leg. But I was actually on a Skype call with her the other day. We were having a science briefing, and she's on the Vancouver to Seattle leg. So such a small world.
Isn't it, though? But again, that's sort of what we were talking about there, plastic soup. There's so many things that we need to think about, isn't there? And little things like that, microfibres in your clothes. I had no idea that was something that was happening. How aware of that were you?
Well, I actually did my undergraduate master's down at Plymouth, so Richard Thompson does a lot of the work on plastics, and I had a few lectures from him, and it is something, unless you've been told about it, you really wouldn't even think about it, but once you do, and my day-to-day work, I'm kind of surrounded by information about plastics, you just realise how much there is and how much of an impact they're having, and until you know the information, it's very hard to, be aware of it.
And Lynn Stubbings mentioned there the impact that Blue Planet has had. Have you noticed a big difference in people's attitudes since that?
Yeah, definitely. I think David Attenborough always does things in such an amazing way, and it's really the way that I think will make the biggest impact. It kind of, if you love something, you care about it, and if you care about it, you're willing to make a difference. And David Attenborough does that to perfection. He makes you really care about the marine environment, and that's great.
There's another environmental story which is in the news today that I just wanted to mention, and that's that the UK government's planning to ban the sale of some wood-burning stoves in a bid to cut pollution. The Environment Secretary wants to curb emissions of smoke and soot, which can lead to health problems including heart disease, strokes and lung cancer. And that ammonia you mentioned, you referred to earlier, Rowan, but I just wonder how significant, again, this is another environmental story. We do seem to be talking more and more, which is brilliant, about protecting our environment and our health as well.
I think it's important as well to weigh things up and look at obviously that sort of thing has an environmental impact, but then also burning and using fossil fuels, which is going to be the alternative in that situation. What impact is that having on larger natural systems and actually the carbon budget? So it's about weighing things up, I feel like.
It's very interesting, but interestingly, when I messaged Beth this morning and said about this, you were actually thinking about getting a wood burner, weren't you?
I wasn't going to mention that. Thank you.
I was. No, but it just shows how we genuinely, until these things do come to light, you have no idea really the sort of impact that we're having as humans on the planet. So it's so important that these things do come up.
I'm just going to get a few extra jumpers now, but probably not wash them, because now I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness.